Yeah, come on. I believe I did nothing to deserve that, so thank you. How's everyone doing tonight? You were very excited to talk about the tax code. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone who's watching online. My name is Aidan Flax-Clark. I'm the director of Life from NYPL. I'm part of the team that brings you all of these events, and I am delighted that you are here and so excited about the tax code, or hopefully angry. I get to introduce tonight law school, where she teaches courses in philanthropy, policy, taxes, property, and estate planning. She's also the co-founder and director of the Boston College Law School Forum on Philanthropy and the Public Good, and that is not an easy thing to say out loud. And tonight, she's in conversation with, obviously, stand-up comedian Gary Gulman. Gary is the author of the recent and excellent memoir, Misfit, and his most recent special is called Born on Third Base, which I loved, and I highly recommend it. And he is currently touring his one-man show, Grandiloquent, which I suppose is an appropriate $5 word here at the library. And Ray and Gary are going to talk about Ray's new book, The Second Estate. The book digs into everyone's favorite beach read, America's Tax Code, which is 7,000 pages, and is right after the Da Vinci Code in one of the most readable of the codes. In the book, Ray argues that the tax code has created two Americas, one in which millions of working Americans pay substantial portions of their resources to support the expenses of the country, and another in which the wealthiest 1% have given the tools to abdicate their responsibilities and, in a sense, to relocate to a tax-free version of American life, which sounds great. What I really love about this book is, and why I'd encourage you to get it, is that Ray takes what could be a deeply arcane, truly head-scratching subject and turns it into something readable and exciting and, you know, not a little bit infuriating. And so I highly encourage you to go pick up the book. It is available for sale outside of the room, and I believe she will be signing it afterwards. And of course, everyone has a New York Public Library card. All right, that's right. More enthusiasm for library cards than tax codes. That's correct. But everyone has it? Yeah. All right, I'll trust you. You can get the book with your library card, as well as Gary's book, Misfit. So if you can't pick it up now, go check it out with your library card. When you walked in the room, you were hopefully given a note card. That is to ask a question. They will take some questions at the end. Please phrase your questions in the form of questions. If you're watching online, you can put your question in the chat. We will get it there as well. Wherever you are, we want to hear from you. Live from NYPL is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Ispahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos. And of course, we couldn't do it without all of you who are here, who are watching online. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your support. And please join me in welcoming Gary Gulman and Ray Madoff.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
And congratulations, Ray.
Thank you, Gary. Congratulations to you.
Oh, I read this book a few months ago and reread it. And what was easy about it was that I had highlighted something on every single page because it's just fascinating and it intersects with my detestation of the wealthy and sort of history, but also humor. It's a very funny book. And the title, this is such a perfect title. Were there any other titles that you had thought of besides The Second Estate?
You know, it's funny you say that.
Yeah.
My editor right now is cringing, as is
Okay.
Dave. So I wanted to go with Wealth Island, a little obscure.
No, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe the next printing. The next.
No, that would have been a great title. The other thing I think you had discussed was why rich people don't pay as much taxes as you.
Yes. So when I wrote my
something
book
along those
proposal, it was under the title "Why You Pay More Taxes Than Billionaires."
Yes.
And that was the title, and I was promptly told, "I'd love to take this book, but not the title."
Okay.
So that was anyway. And actually, I do feel that the title actually tells us a lot more about what we need.
Completely. Once
to
you understand what the Second Estate was, and I will say what it says because I love reading this sentence. The second estate was the nobility of pre-revolutionary France. Revolutionary France involved the guillotine. I think that's important to remember what the stakes are. The second estate enjoyed special privileges, such as the right to hunt and wear a sword. And this is where Ray and I come in. And was exempt from paying taxes.
Yes.
I don't know what is more exciting, wearing a sword or keeping every dollar you make while people literally starve.
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
Okay. And so at what point in your research did you come across this case of the second estate in France, and how far along the line did you say, well, this is actually the stakes that are involved in what we're doing now, because we are intersecting with that type of wealth gap.
Yeah, I came across this great quote by a DuPont who was actually, he was an economist around the time of pre-revolutionary France. And he actually spoke to the French Assembly, and he said something like, to become aristocratic, you simply have to be rich. To not pay taxes, you simply have to be aristocratic. Therefore, the only way to avoid paying taxes is to become incredibly rich. And I thought, aha, this sounds quite familiar.
Yeah. And it's infuriating from page one, and it's a page turner, which I studied taxes. I was an accounting major at Boston College, and it was the driest, most dense reading. And this, I flew through. I think I read it in 3 days when you got it to me, not knowing when I would be called on to interview you about it. So I had also 3 months to digest it, and then I reread it this weekend. And it's just, it's funny. It includes, here's my favorite part of it, which is where you quote me. Yeah. Because being rich is one thing, and I'm all for it. And I urge you to have $20 million. It sounds like it's all. It sounds like all you need.
20 million.
But we are not talking about 20 millionaires.
Yeah.
We are talking about billionaires here. And as I so beautifully put it in 2011, here's how you can become a billionaire. How much money we're talking about. Win a $100 million Mega Millions jackpot every week for 600 consecutive weeks, and you will be as wealthy as Bill Gates was in 2011.
Yes.
But that type of streak, mind you, rare. Rare. Almost as rare as billionaires.
Oh, yeah.
But I love it because it's accessible and it is easy to read. And as John Irving said in a great Kurt Vonnegut documentary that I recommend, it is not easy to be easy to read.
You know, that is very wise.
Yeah, and I should have just passed it off as my own, because it doesn't seem like people are connecting with the original.
Yeah.
But do you think that one of the reasons you are easy to read is because you've had to explain a lot of these concepts to people who are, they're not novices.
Oh, no,
but
they're novices. They are very much novices. Yes.
Really?
Yes. And I have to say, I have a weird compulsion, which is to explain tax things to novices.
Okay.
And if anybody wanders up to me and has any inclination to discuss anything, like my fantasy is someone says, like, could you tell me about the generation skipping transfer tax? And that would pretty much make my day.
Oh, I love that.
I don't get that question that often, but I do. But I will have people say, like, oh, I don't want to bother you, but like I have a question about like estates or estate taxes. I'm like, you know,
oh, that's amazing.
I am raring to go. Yeah, I love it. I love to explain it. I can't explain why I'm this way. I was born this way, I guess.
No, because the information is interesting if it's being told by somebody like yourself who has humor and is also accessible and not writing for other experts on this. You're right. You're writing for people who are. I mean, I'm not a novice, but a lot of these things I will have you explain to me because they took some research for me to understand them. But one of the things that I knew going in was that there was an argument, I think in the first or second Obama term, that Warren Buffett had become famous for. And I love it when these things that you think are common sense are undone by somebody smarter than me. And you did this so well. So the Buffett rule, which he presented in an op-ed in the New York Times, and it made him seem like such a reasonable billionaire and magnanimous.
And he called it, it's time to soak the rich, or something like that.
And it was just so disingenuous. So please explain why.
And it's interesting because here's one way you can know that the Buffett rule would have done nothing for rich people, is that last summer Jamie Dimon said, if we should solve problems by bringing back the Buffett rule. And so that was a pretty good sign that Jamie Buffett, famous current rich person, very rich person. Anyway, what the Buffett rule, so some of you might remember the Buffett rule. It was supposed to solve all of our tax unfairness. And Warren Buffett said the problem is that he paid taxes at a lower rate than his secretary. Remember hearing about Warren Buffett's secretary and how unfair that was? And therefore, he should pay taxes at the same rate. People who have $100 million of income should pay taxes at the same rate as regular people. So not have preferential capital gains rates, which are lower than taxes on earnings. What he didn't tell anybody is that had the Buffett rule been enacted, it would not have raised any money at all, and even Warren Buffett would not have paid more taxes under the Buffett rule, because the problem was not tax rates, the problem is taxable income. And that's because the first way that the wealthiest Americans are able to avoid taxes is they avoid salaries, wages, all of that regular way that most people get money to do what they need to with their lives, right? They get paid for work that they do. But if you're very rich, you know that that is a sucker ploy, because that type of earnings is subject to two levels of taxes, both income taxes at the highest level and payroll taxes. So it's quite burdensome. And here in New York, you also have very high income taxes, and you pile it all together, and they are quite significant taxes on people who earn money. And people who earn a lot of money pay a lot of taxes. That might not be obvious, but it's true. But for the super rich, they don't earn a lot of money. Matter of fact, they take extremely modest salaries. Warren Buffett has never taken more than $100,000 for both salary and bonus combined. And you think, like, well, what a great guy, what a modest guy. No, he's avoiding taxes. And Jeff Bezos, one of the sort of touching little elements of it, he takes the salary of $80,000 over the past 2 decades. And this has been low enough that he's been able to claim the child tax credit, which he has.
Which he has.
Which he has.
Oh,
of course he has. He'd be a fool not to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing that keeps coming up when I was reading this, and this type of discussion has been going on in my family because my oldest brother is an estate planner. He's a CPA and really big on taxation, and he will say, well, I do everything that's legal. Yeah. And we both are associated with Boston College. I'm a graduate, and you're a professor there, and it's a Jesuit institution, and it may be legal. How do we wrap our minds around whether it's ethical and whether it's moral to do this?
Yeah, I know.
Does that come up?
No, it doesn't come up.
I remember I had a professor for accounting, and he mentioned the golden rule. And I thought, oh yeah, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, from Christ's Sermon on the Mount. And he said, and he thought he was so cute and clever. Whoever has the gold makes the rule. And
you know what? He was a wise man. It's sad. It's sad.
He was a wise man, but cynical. I think it's the most cynical thing I had ever heard, and I was outraged.
Yes, but I do think it's the case that we can't. You'll sometimes see this. in the pages of the Wall Street Journal opinion pages, will they be like, well, you know, the left wants to pay more taxes, they should just pay more taxes. You know, I think that it doesn't make sense. People are entitled to follow the rules.
Yeah.
But we need to have legislators and that are making appropriate rules. And that's really where the fault lay. They are the ones that are
Yeah.
supposed to be keeping up with the rules. And unfortunately, they have been doing a lot of quiet quitting when it comes to taxing the rich.
Right, but I mean, one of the ethical things is, should we be spending a lot of money lobbying to undo the tax code or arrest the gift taxes?
Is this the proverbial we? Are you spending your money that way? Oh, you're talking about rich people spending their money
Rich
that
people
way?
spending their
Yes.
money.
No,
Like
that's
you say,
right.
they seek to prevent it from catching
Yeah.
up to changes in society,
Yes.
but they're not seeking. They're fighting tooth and
Yes,
nail.
absolutely.
And to me, that's unethical. That's
Yeah.
immoral.
And I'm going to layer on the policy issue as well. They're not just doing it with their own money, because they're often funding things like 501c4 organizations for which they get tax benefits, which means they're doing it with our money as well.
Wow. Wow. That. You have a sentence here where it says, for many wealthy Americans, taxable income has become a matter of choice, a non-necessity that can be avoided with little cost.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, dividends. There was a thing that I learned about in college called dividends.
Yeah.
And what has happened with
Yeah, so
dividends
rare.
now?
Yeah. So it used
With Buffett as a prime example of
Right, yes. So it used to be the case that people who had a lot of stock had a lot of income, because the only way that companies could share their profits with their shareholders were to issue something called dividends. And they would be issued with connection with stock. And back in the day, for many, many years, dividends were taxed just like compensation income at the highest level. And so companies became profitable, they distributed their profits, and the owners of the stock paid taxes at the highest level. However, beginning in 1982, due to a very obscure change in the Securities and Exchange Commission rules, there was a new way for companies to share profits that did not involve taxable dividends. It was a way that hardly anybody noticed even. It was like this guy on his own. He was an E.F. Hutton executive who Reagan had made head of the SEC. And he goes, I've got a great idea. Let's allow companies to buy back their own stock. These things are called stock buybacks. You might have heard that phrase, stock buybacks. Stock buybacks are very, very big, and they have been very big since they were first allowed in 1982. Companies buying back their own stock was not allowed before because it was seen as a form of market manipulation, because if a company buys back its own stock, the value of the stock goes up, right? Because you have more buyers out there and you have fewer shares, and so the value goes up. And if you're the least bit confused there, don't worry, you don't need to know. All you need to know is it is a tax-free way for, it was a way for companies to share profits where people with a lot of wealth could decide to just enjoy the growth in value of the stock that comes about from the stock buybacks. And this has been a huge transformation in the capacity for people to own a lot of stock and not pay taxes.
Because it's not income. That was the main thing that I
Yeah.
took away from so much of this. Was
It's
the
not
main
taxable
thing, like
income.
you just
So-
said, was that Warren Buffett doesn't pay any money because he doesn't have
And- yeah.
taxable
And there's a
income,
great
but
story,
he has value in
Huge
the
value, yeah.
billions.
And Berkshire
yearly.
Hathaway, so that's Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway is famous for never paying dividends. Now, apparently, it did pay dividends once, and Warren Buffett wrote in his avuncular letters that he must have been in the bathroom at the time when they issued when the other people voted to issue the dividend. So he's very much anti-issuing dividends because growth in value is itself tax-free. And the problem is that it's not just tax-free during a person's life. It is actually always tax-free until the stock gets sold, but it doesn't ever need to get sold because the richest Americans can use their stock as collateral and simply borrow against their stock. And so because of that, they don't have to sell their stock, they don't have to pay taxes on the gains. And these gains are quite significant. If you look at our, some of our favorite multi-billionaires, like Mark Zuckerberg, like his assets have gone up like by $100 billion just in the last 2 to 3 years alone. Larry Ellison, $150 billion. Warren Buffett's only gone up by $50 billion over the last year and a half, hardly anything.
Right, but Larry Ellison is particularly nefarious because he's taken over the island of Lanai and has become like an emperor.
Yes, he does.
This book. And I'm learning all this from the book. I had no idea that Larry Ellison was a Colonel Curtian type figure in Lanai, of all places, which is much more temperate than where Kurtz was in the Belgian Congo. But you brought up this. You didn't mention it, but there's a strategy that they use to live these lavish lifestyles, and Larry Ellison is a great example of this. Is it buy, borrow, die? Buy, borrow, die, yes. Buy, borrow, die,
that was the, yes. So that's the sort of, if you never went to law school and took a basic tax class, you can get most of it right here with the 3 words, buy, borrow, die. And what that says basically is if you want to avoid taxes, start by buying some investment asset, stock or other thing that's something that's going to go up in value. Don't sell it. If you sell it, you're going to have to pay taxes. But if you simply borrow against it, then you can enjoy all the fruits of owning money because you've got that money, right? You can do whatever you want with it. You can buy the island of Lanai. You can buy CBS. If you got enough,
using your
you can
stock
do it
as
all.
collateral.
Yes.
You can spend all this money, and none of the money you're spending is subject to tax.
That's right. It's not. It's nobody's business. It's just your own private business. And then the die part is for those people who pass the property on at death to their heirs or to whoever, get the gains. They get a little extra bonus because, why not add sort of like the extra swag that billionaires get at the parties they go to. So this is a little extra bonus, which is that all the gains get wiped away at death and the heirs are treated as if they had purchased the property. And so that's just an added benefit.
Do they call it the angel of death tax?
Yeah, they call it the angel of death loophole.
The angel of death loophole.
The angel of death loophole,
which
yes.
has changed from its Exodus Old Testament. The angel of death loophole was the death of the firstborn son. And now it is you can give $10 million of inheritance and it'll be treated the same tax-wise as a person who has no income at all.
Yeah, that is true. Yes, because the other piece of it is that inheritances, somebody who receives $10 million, they don't even have to tell anybody about it. Again, it's their own private business. But by the way, if you do a thing about finding $20, I think in your case it was in your own pocket, but let's say you found it on the street.
Right, you're supposed to pay taxes on the $20.
You got to pay taxes on it. You know that. You're an accountant.
But if
I assume you filed the tax returns that show that.
But if it was from a dead relative, then all is forgiven. But I think, and for you young people out there, the biggest growth industry seems to be inheriting.
Yes.
And it's, the only difficult thing is really to suppress a smile at the funeral.
Yeah.
to not jump up and down as the casket is being lowered, yelling, "I'm rich, I'm rich." That could just be a weekly phone call to a rich relative. There was on every page something because I've never forgiven the rich for being rich, and it has colored all my life and work. F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Ooh.
I wish I had said something so pithy, but that was F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it's just on every page, and so we talk about the inheritance tax, and I always look to a person or a movement or sometimes it's a movie or because greed is good was
Yeah.
a big rallying cry in the 1980s. But there seems to be a man named Frank Luntz
Oh, yeah.
who was sort of they call him a wordsmith, but he's more of a
Oh, what's going to come?
because a wordsmith generally is like a poet or something like this, but he's more of a propagandist, I think,
Yes.
Frank Luntz, in his use of words, because he labeled the estate tax or the inheritance tax the death tax,
Yes.
and for some reason, even poor people are really bummed out at the prospect of a double taxation,
Yeah.
and that's what it sounds like if you call it a tax on
That's
a
right.
dead person.
And if you call it a death tax, it also sounds like it's something that comes for everyone, right? Like death. And it comes at a really kind of a mean time.
Yes.
Sort of like, I'll just
Yes.
kick you when you're down,
Yes.
literally. Yes.
Yeah.
So Frank Luntz, he had focus groups, and he brought them together, and he said, 5% of the people want to get rid of the estate tax, but like 70% want to get rid of the death tax, and he was involved in changing that. By the way, do any of you remember the phrase global warming and how scary that was? Right, we used to have global warming.
Yeah.
Frank Luntz brought us. I know you didn't know I was going to go here.
No.
Climate change.
Wow.
It's just different, not necessarily bad, not worse, not warmer,
Wow.
not scary, like getting hotter,
My
hotter and hotter.
gosh.
Yeah, he
Oh,
did it all.
He's worse than the Riddler
He's
in terms of enemies in Gotham. It's Joker-esque, my word. Wow, Frank Luntz. Yeah, so the death tax, and then associated with that, there was a man that they sent out who was a farmer
Yeah.
who and it was just perfect stagecraft of the farmer. I'm going to lose my
Yeah.
farm, but what
not just
people,
a farmer. Chester Thigpen,
Chester Thigpen,
grandchild of slaves, who had a Christmas tree farm. He had a Christmas tree farm, and you
Yeah.
want to destroy it. You want to ruin
Right,
it.
but he was just a prop. He was not-
You want to get rid of it. You want
Yeah.
him to suffer. That was basically that was the argument, that anybody who was in favor of the estate tax wanted Chester Thigpen, a slave who had acquired a Christmas tree farm, to
Yeah.
suffer.
Yeah, but it was again propaganda,
Yeah.
and they're just
They wanted to call it they proposed calling the estate tax repeal law the Chester Thigpen Death Tax Repeal Act. They wanted, because he was so successful. He was constantly testifying, and but after he died, it turns out that he was afraid that he was going to be subject to the tax. It turns out he wasn't subject to the tax because his farm fell well within the exemption amount. But there was so much fear-mongering that was going on that actually there was a poll that was done, I think it was in 2017, that 67% of the public believed that the estate tax or death tax applied primarily to middle class and poor people. I mean, it was just such an effective disinformation campaign.
Yeah, yeah, and that your book reminded me of Matthew Desmond's Poverty by America, in that it was so good at dispelling a lot of the myths associated, and the idea. I remember in Desmond's book, he talked about the propaganda of the welfare queen and the person who's on welfare there for generation after generation, and he was so great at dispelling that. And you're so great at dispelling this. And this is my favorite chapter is chapter 5, the I in philanthropy.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
The I in philanthropy, because my mother was a very interesting woman. We were a poor family on food stamps, and she just idolized the rich. We would drive around neighborhoods and look at their homes, and she was just in awe of these people. And we had my brother married into a family that had a connection to a very rich family, and my mother was so in awe of these people, and she talked about what generous philanthropists they were, and this would enrage me, and I would say, I guarantee you, all their philanthropy is to lessen their tax burden. Ma, I've met these people; they're completely unimpressive. They were shoe moguls. They owned a knockoff shoe company, and I said I said, they don't fool me.
Yeah, you
They do
knew.
not fool
You
me.
knew.
These are not philanthropists. There is an I in their philanthropy.
Yes.
And
You said
man,
you coined the phrase, the I in philanthropy.
and I read this after my mother had passed, but it would have been a real gotcha to read this to her. But I love this that you and I give, and we are among the 90% of Americans who receive zero tax benefit
Yeah.
from their charitable giving because most of us don't itemize.
Yeah.
Right? And so explain how the tax benefits of charity are counterproductive and wind up costing us and the government more than if these people had just either paid their employees more or paid their taxes.
Right.
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5. Say it. Describe it.
The I in philanthropy, my
Yeah.
word.
Okay. So here's the shorter version, which is the first step is, as you say, that people don't understand. So there's two levels of kind of misinformation about philanthropy. This way for the mic. One is that people tend to think that they're going to get more charitable tax benefits than they do. And you hear this a lot, like at the end of the year, December will be coming up, and all the charities will say, you might get tax benefits, like better get it in by year end. And there's a huge amount, something like 70% of the charitable giving occurs in like the last 3 days of the tax year, because we all believe, because there's a hyper awareness of it. But in fact, as you say, 90% of Americans get no tax benefits for their charitable giving, because if you don't itemize, you don't get charitable tax benefits. Now they're adding a little bit of one so that you'll get some charitable tax benefits in the new bill, but very modest. Okay. Flip to the other side. And the other thing is, if somebody were to let's say you were to give a huge amount to charity. Let's say somebody who earned $100,000 said, you know what, I'm going to give all $100,000 to the food bank right now because so many people need food, and I can afford to do it. So if they give that money, that will not eliminate their tax liability, because we put caps on the tax benefit for people who have income. They can only deduct like 50%, and they can't offset their payroll taxes. So they're still going to pay significant taxes. Okay, now move over to the other side, to the wealthiest Americans, and their philanthropy is very different because, as we mentioned, they don't have taxable income, so that's not really their jam, right?
Yeah.
They're in the world of capital gains taxes, right? Their stock that has gone up in value, and estate and gift taxes. Those benefits together are worth about 60%, right? If they sold the stock and then passed it at their estates, they would be paying 60% of that in taxes, right? If they had a lot of money. But if instead they give it to charity, they pay no taxes at all. And they can entirely eliminate their tax liability by giving to charity. Now, you know, it's questionable, right? That's a lot of benefits, 60% tax benefits. That means it's foregone revenue that the rest of us have to somehow either borrow or, you know, find a way to get that money for the government, our own taxes. But what I am particularly concerned about is how what we get for those benefits is often a lot less than what we think. And that's because the way the rules have been transformed over the past 30 years or so is that people can get the tax benefits by giving to their own donor-controlled charity called private foundations or donor-advised funds, and that money never has to get to charity. So we're providing these
Say that again, because it's
and currently
it's
like
disgusting.
more than 40%.
The money never gets paid out to
Yes,
a charity.
it might get paid out. So
Right.
it might get paid out. So my concern
But
is
it doesn't
not,
have to.
but
They
it
are under
doesn't
no
have to.
obligation
Yes,
to pay out
exactly.
the money.
And that's why, I mean, these are really these aren't complaining about people, these are complaining about rules, that we deserve better rules than the rules that we have. You might be complaining about the people.
But give me the example of the Uber driver who makes $100,000. This is such a great microcosm of what's going on. Driving Uber versus owning stock in
Oh,
Uber.
yeah. I thought it was 60,000, 80,000? Was it 100,000?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. So the difference is, right, so this is about the difference this was actually the thing that Warren Buffett was complaining about, right?
Yeah.
That somebody who is, who drives an Uber is going to have quite significant, probably, they say they get $100,000, they're going to pay, $35,000 in taxes. They're going to pay quite a bit of money in taxes. But somebody who invests in Uber stock and grows to 100,000, right? They're going to pay nothing in taxes unless they sell, and even if they sell, they're going to pay at a much lower rate.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Now I would like to get to the stakes because we're getting close to question times.
Yeah.
Your selection of facts within this book are so good, and from history but also recent things. But this is one of my favorite ones, and you're quoting from the New York Post. Every republic runs its greatest risk not from discontented soldiers as from discontented multi-billionaires. All previous republics had been overthrown by rich men. This could happen in America too, as monopoly capitalists were deriding the Constitution, unrebuked by the executive or by public opinion. It sounds like he's talking, this is the trick I'm pulling on you. It sounds like this came out this week. 1900. 1900. But we had an ally. There were more allies amongst the billionaire class back then. Andrew Mellon, for one, who said, I would just as soon give my family a curse as to pass on my wealth.
Andrew Mellon?
Yeah, or maybe it was Andrew Carnegie.
Andrew
It was an
Carnegie.
Andrew.
Andrew
It was an
Carnegie.
Andrew.
Andrew Mellon. You might notice we have a Mellon heir today.
Yeah.
But
But
Andrew
even Mellon
passed
was
his
more of
money.
an ally.
Well,
than-
he had a momentary time of allyship.
Yeah.
A momentary time of allyship on some issues, and on other issues,
Okay.
a little less of an ally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah.
Andrew Carnegie was very concerned
And
with
Roosevelt,
inherited
Teddy
wealth.
Roosevelt.
And Teddy Roosevelt,
Yeah.
another rich guy, very concerned about the problems. And lots of people were very concerned. Even the Wall Street Journal ran an article saying we need to have estate taxes, which is kind of hard to believe, an op-ed about that. And the reason was there was real concern at that time about socialism, and then later on communism. These were real threats in the country, and they felt that we needed to prove that capitalism could work for everyone. And the way we could prove that capitalism worked for everyone is that we would have rich people pay taxes, then we'd all win by the presence of rich people. And some have suggested that with the demise of capitalism, of communism, there's now no alternative to capitalism, and there's no need for rich people to say, well, we got to prove that capitalism works, because, what else are we going to do? There's not really a viable alternative for us that we can easily turn to. And because of that, some have argued that that is one of the reasons why we have kind of been able to move away from taxing the rich.
Right. Although the French guillotine was.
Another effective tool.
All right. So before we go to questions, what do we do? You gave three steps to remedy or at least rein in this insanity within the tax code. And so repealing the estate tax, bringing inheritances and investments into the income tax system, and reforming the rules around philanthropy to strengthen the charitable sector, while ensuring that everyone plays a role in supporting the country's expenses. I mean, that's the. I loved that you didn't just complain about everything going on. You gave steps to remedying it. So could you elaborate on that, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah. So basically, of course, people who know me know that I wrote a lot about the estate tax, the value of the estate tax, the importance of the estate tax, and then sometimes they call me in the middle of the book, they go, so you're going to say we should fortify the estate tax? Something like that. And no, but because what has happened is over the time I have realized is that the estate tax has been effectively killed. There is no bringing back the estate tax. And what it does now is, as it stands, it basically provides cover for the rich, making it seem like they're paying taxes, and rather than actually imposing any burdens on them. And when people say we're going to fix the estate tax, neither Democrats nor Republicans have proposed a single bill to close loopholes since 1990. That is the last time there has been a reform effort to reform the estate tax. So I think even somebody like me has to realize that people don't like the estate tax. We have to get rid of it. But part of the reason is because of this unfair feeling that we're like we're kicking people when they're down. And a lot of people don't know that inheritances, that $10 million, which you just were given, that's entirely tax-free. So I think a much fairer system would be to get rid of the estate tax, but to say that people should pay income taxes on their gifts and inheritances. And you could even say that people can get like $2 million tax-free, and we'd still be a lot better off than we are now. And people, I think, would recognize that as being a fairer system. After that, we got to bring in investments into the income tax system. We should say whenever you transfer property, we'll tax the gain so you don't wait for the sale. And finally, reform philanthropy, and we don't have time to go over those details.
Reform philanthropy.
Yes,
Okay.
make sure that the money will actually make its way to charity. We're going to give significant tax benefits. The charities are all suffering now because used to be that in order for donors to get the tax benefits, the money would have to get to the charity. But now it just has to get halfway there. So we got to reform the rules to get the money all the way there.
Love it. Okay, now the questions. All right. With the administration boasting about plans to crush and cancel, I apologize. This is it is print. And cancel all Democrat programs. At what point can we decline to pay our taxes? Ooh.
Okay, yeah.
On the basis that there is no representation.
Oh, nice one. Taxation without
Great
representation.
question. Yes.
What an excellent question. So I was, I bumped into a friend that I had gone to college with and hadn't seen in many years. And she said, wow, she goes, you're a tax lawyer. I said, this is before I was a tax professor, I was a tax lawyer. I said, yeah. She goes, I'm a tax evader.
Oof. Oh, my word.
And it's a thing, right, where people would not pay taxes. But I would not recommend that because
Never say evade, say avoid.
No. Rich people avoid taxes, right? Regular people.
Oh, you had a great line where you say, poor people give charity, rich people give philanthropy.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And rich people avoid taxes entirely legal.
Yeah.
And people who have salaries might try to evade taxes, but not legal. And I wouldn't mess around with that right now.
Okay. How can you use the buy, borrow, die strategy with RMDs?
Oh, my God. You can't. Okay.
All right.
So, wait, but here's an interesting thing.
Ha.
Here is an interesting thing. You might think, okay, we don't want to know about RMDs, but I want to tell you the interesting fact about this. RMDs are something to do with retirement plans, right? You'll sometimes hear people say, all of this capital gain stuff, like the preferential rules for investments, apply to everybody because we have our 401ks, IRAs, our tax-exempt retirement savings. But the thing is, workers who have those types of savings are actually not subject to the advantageous capital gains rules. They are subject to a separate set of rules, which you might remember, Gary, that it is all ordinary income, just like your salary. You don't get that chance to not pay taxes by not selling or get lower rates. If you have an IRA or a 401k or an RMD, required minimum distribution, you have to pay all the taxes on it.
I like that.
Thank you.
Okay. this question, and the person who wrote it may have to help me. Can you tell me about the blank skipping tax? What is the
Generation skipping
Generation
transfer
skipping
tax.
tax.
Is that a plant? Is that
All right.
Oh, how nice. She's just toying with me because of how
But
much
you
I
need
love.
to work on your penmanship. Oh, my word. Can you talk about the generation skipping tax?
No, you know what? You don't
right.
want to get me started
Okay.
on the generation skipping transfer
right.
tax. I'll never stop.
Okay, when the lobbying...
We'll talk afterwards. Come on.
This-
We'll go away for 4 days. Yeah.
You're doing great tonight, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When the lobbying forces are so well funded, I know. What is a realistic path? This is a beautiful question.
Oh, it's so
What is a
sad.
realistic path towards spurring congressional action
Yes.
to closing key loopholes?
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, here is the first step. The reason, which is learn your rights. Learn what's actually going on with the tax code. Because the problem that's going on is there is a massive duping of the public about who in fact pays taxes. And one of the favorites, which if I can pull out some numbers here, if you don't mind. Well, you're not going to mind, but hopefully they won't mind either. So you'll often hear, and whenever you talk about taxing the rich, you'll hear this statistic about how the richest 1% are already paying 40% of the taxes, and 40% of Americans pay no taxes at all. Have any of you ever heard that statistic?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you hear that statistic, richest 1% are paying 40%, and 40% of Americans pay no taxes, and you'd say, like, what are you guys doing up there? Everything is fine, and in fact, we already have a highly progressive system, and you're probably part of the takers and not makers. But the reason that statistic is really misleading, and it causes people to think, well, we don't have a problem in our system. But that is a statistic about income taxes. And the reason it is so misleading is that it is talking about the people with the top 1% of income. Those are high salaried doctors, lawyers, finance people. Those people are in fact paying most of the income taxes. But the richest Americans, right, your Bezoses, your Buffetts, your all of these guys, they do not have taxable income. So they are just as likely to be among the 40% of non-payers as they are in the top 1% of payers. And so don't be fooled by these statistics that make you think that there is no problem out there. And learn about what the real, and the statistics about, and things like, oh, the rich are already subject to double taxes because of the estate tax. Like, now you know, not really the case because it's so loophole ridden. And so the most important thing is for the public to learn about these things, and then one place you can look. I have one suggestion for you. But so that you can speak effectively when people tell you, oh, the rich are already paying taxes, that's the first step of what we need in order to actually bring about real reform, is for the educated public. We're here in the New York Public Library, right? And the educated public has been kind of kept in the dark about things, and they've been told that taxes are too boring, taxes aren't fun, they're not interesting, they're too hard to understand, and the system is fair anyway, or it's unfair and you can't make it not unfair. But you can make it not unfair. You can understand that simple things can make a big difference, and that will make a big difference in bringing about reform.
Yes, and it just, when you're having these arguments with the people who said, oh, when Romney made that argument.
Yeah, the 47%.
The 40% who aren't paying, but they're paying in their
paying
payroll
taxes. Yeah.
Yes, and you have that information, and you can meet their
Yes.
misinformation with your information.
Oh,
I mean,
love that.
I don't know if you've ever tried opium. I have not, but I can't imagine an opium high is as good as the righteousness you will feel when you use examples from this book to tell off these people, because they're not that well informed, and you will be 174 pages. That's all we're asking.
With and big print.
And big print. And it's a page turner, and the chapters aren't all that long.
No,
and
long.
it's just it was a delight to read. As much as I loved Matthew Desmond's Poverty by America, it was close to 400 pages, and also didn't quote me once. This is a great question and written beautifully in all caps. Would wealth taxes be a solution?
Oh. Yeah. Okay. So I think wealth taxes are going to not be the solution. And there's a couple of problems with it. One is that the Supreme Court has already tipped their hand that just give them the chance, they're going to want to find it unconstitutional. So that's one problem with it. But I also think that if we have an annual tax on wealth, what we're going to have is we're going to have a whooshing sound of the wealthiest Americans pulling their money out of the publicly traded and easily to value stock market in which all of our retirement money is held, and put into complex partnerships and all sorts of things, multi-layered entities that the IRS, the underfunded IRS, will never be able to value. So I think annual taxes on wealth are just I shudder to think what would happen with them.
One thing that just occurred to me.
Wow, that almost got an applause. I can't
was
believe that. Ah, my sister. Yeah, yes.
Are there penalties on foundations that retain all their earnings?
Oh, no, if they don't, no, there are no penalties, because the way that so you might have heard that foundations have a 5% payout rule. Did you ever hear that? Okay, so you think, like, what is she saying? They don't have to pay out. But private foundations, which are when you create your own charity and you run it, can fully meet their payout. Well, actually, two ways. One is by paying salaries to the family members, which I don't talk about in this book, but talk about in other places. But in addition, if you're talking about a big one, they can also fully meet their payout by giving to a donor-advised fund. That's kind of like a private foundation. It's money controlled by the same people with no payout requirement. So they have a payout requirement to an entity that has no payout requirement. So there's no penalties if you do it that way.
All right. I think.
Oh.
Well done.
One more.
Your instincts are right. Although we may have time for two more, but it depends on how long it takes you to answer this one.
Okay.
And I'm going to have a question off this question, because this is interesting. Is it true that among developed countries, the U.S. has the lowest tax rate?
Tax rate. We have, I can't tell you the tax rates, because different countries raise money in different ways. A lot of countries raise money through VATs, which are sort of sales taxes. There's a lot of complexity, but there is the percentage of tax revenue to GDP, and we are very low on that front. So,
yeah. And so I was just in London, and it seemed like
little humble brag.
They were getting a lot.
To a sold-out show by any chance, Gary? To a cheering audiences?
Sales were very brisk. And I was just in awe of their infrastructure.
Oh,
and
don't ride their subways, you'll cry.
I rode their subways and used their subway restrooms. Can you believe? And my wife and I wanted to weep. Yeah. Because we're paying just as much in taxes as they are, and so what is the difference?
Yeah, I know. What's the difference?
It's just they're
priorities.
Much more amenable to socialism and
just priorities.
Yeah,
their
priorities.
Yeah, general civic life. Yeah.
Wow. But a great question.
And a great run, I hear.
And this one kind of goes over my head, but the earnestness with which this is asked, I feel I want to ask this of you. Should pass-through entities slash partnership tax policy. By the way, this isn't in the book. I would have
No.
remembered.
Yeah.
I would have remembered this. Should pass-through entities slash partnership tax policy be reformed? Maybe. What do you think?
Yes. Yes, I'll go with a yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What type of student would ask that question? The pretty
One
informed.
one banking for an A. Yes.
Nice. Well, this was a delightful conversation.
Yes,
I
thank you.
urge everyone to read this and give it to friends for Xmas or Hanukkah, because they will thank you. It just feels so good to be informed about these things and to be able to put words to this feeling that we all have that something unfair is going on. And something's going on, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Right. And now you know.
And now I know
Yeah.
exactly what it is. And God rest her soul, but Mom, philanthropy is a con. All right. And so congratulations, Ray, and please applaud Ray's work in this.
Oh, thank you. And,
Able a signing, right?
a signing.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, wait, we're supposed to wait.